read the one side of the page. Half the words were missing. Nobody noticed.
Will you ever take that test where
can tell. This is Thursday meeting. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Lake County School Board Workshop of March 23rd, 2017. If we would first begin with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Good morning and welcome to a special Thursday edition of our workshop. Thank you all for being here, and a special welcome to Diane Cornegie, now sitting in the superintendent's seat.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to have you there. We do have one public input card this morning, and that's Vance Yoakum.
They moved the lectern, so I got to walk farther. First of all, welcome Ms. Carnegie for being the superintendent. I think we've been waiting years for this. What I want to do is to talk about something that's not on the agenda, but I think it's kind of serious, and probably some people might say it's not politically correct, but I just want to comment because I have a lot of news sources that I think a lot of you folks don't. And the issue is that in Rockville, Maryland, they had that situation where there was two immigrants that raped a 14-year-old girl on the campus. And I want to bring up the fact that one is that it's been identified that those are both what are called UACs, or unaccompanied children. If you remember, Obama let a lot of people on a train, youngsters, come across the border. There were actually a lot of reports showing that his people were advertising for people to come up on something like that. And that those folks, one of the things is a lot of them are over age, and they might be 19. In this case, there was one that was 18 and another one was 17, but they were registered because they lied about their age and they were put in the 9th grade classes. And the issue that I just want to bring up is that I would hope that the administration here is got some way to track those unaccompanied children that come in because they come from a different culture and they have not been assimilated. I don't think we have many of them here because we don't have many refugees coming into this county because I've already been monitoring that. But I just want to bring up the fact that I would encourage the board to ensure that the administration has the resources or the direction to make sure that they are aware of those risks, and that if you have anybody coming in that are UACs, especially older ones that have lied about their age and appears to be common, that and they're put in younger grades because they want the benefits and they also escape some of the things. It's actually part of a plan. And so all I can say is I've seen the reports of it, so I just wanted to point that out. With that, I look forward to this plan and everything else that we're going to see today. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of items on our agenda today, just a couple to talk about the administrative organization and the organizational chart, and that's going to lead into some strategic finance plan recommendations. So I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
So good morning, and thank everyone for being flexible and giving us a Thursday meeting instead of a Monday. I know it threw us all off a bit, but Monday was an important day. It was our first day back from spring break, and it was an opportunity that I had while kids weren't in session to meet with all of our assistant principals, who I'm still getting to know. That's a large group, and then spent the afternoon with all of our principals. And it was a great time of just planning and collaboration, getting their input on what you're going to see today prior to presenting it to the board, because I think that's always important. One of the things that I share with all of you, that I shared with them, is that my philosophy is we do things with people and not to people. And so with that approach, it meant that I wanted to make sure that all those impacted by changes had an opportunity to see it and give input into the process. So again, thank you for that. I'm going to move this one. I told them I can't talk to you from sitting up there, and I wanted to be able to reference the screen. So I'm always challenging Alex and Jim are in the back, and they're always so flexible. They just say whatever you need, so I appreciate that. So this is step 2 in the process in regards to the strategic finance plan. So as we think about this work, if you'll remember our first board meeting, you all agreed upon some norms. So we'll always reference those norms so we can hold each other accountable. I didn't bring any of the rubber balls or anything for you to throw at each other, but I think you have some candy or something should you need it. So I'll give you just a second and remind you of these. I'm not going to read them to you. And you do have a copy of all of this. We're still good with these? Okay. And then we're always going to make sure that we reference everything that we do in regards to why we exist, our mission and our vision, and the supporting ideas behind that vision. So again, I'll share that with you for just a moment. And then go into our purpose for today. So we're going to discuss the categorization and recommendations of the ideas and priorities that you generated on the last strategic planning retreat that we had. In reference to that, I'm going to present the 17-18 District Administrative Organizational Chart, along with the projected cost savings of both the organizational design as well as some projected costs for some of your priorities. And then we'll talk about what our next steps are. So here's where we started. What I asked you to do, first of all, I talked to each of you. You gave me your strategic finance plan priorities, and we compiled all of them. And then at the workshop, you did some priority setting by numbering your top 1 through 5. You each shared your top priorities, and then thanks to Melissa Desjardins, she took all of that and she compiled it into one document, which I emailed back out to you that listed your priorities. So this was just a reminder of those priorities and some of the things that we'll discuss today, and I'll explain some of the highlighting of that. We're going to come back to this, but I just wanted to make sure for the audience's purposes that you knew where this came from and what these look like. But the number one priority of the board, and one of my priorities that I shared with you as well, was that we wanted to repurpose some existing district administrative positions to increase support for schools within feeder patterns through a regional organizational structure. Okay? So that was my number one task as your number one priority, and that's what we'll be looking at today, is how that was accomplished. And I can tell you, I did not do this alone. Sitting here today is your senior staff. We've spent hours and hours working on this, getting input. I've walked every school except for one at this point that I couldn't get in prior to spring break. We talked about this idea and what would those supports look like, and trying to get as wide of a pool of input as I possibly could. But I want to thank all of you for the time that you spent contributing to this process, and some hard decisions and conversations that we had about our goal. And that goal was really twofold. One, these are the things that you asked me to do. You asked me to look at administrative cost and how do we reduce cost so that we can save money to put more money back into our schools. That is a priority. You also asked me to increase direct supports and services to students and schools through this regional structure. In doing so, decentralizing the district office as it exists, as an entity, to ensure that we are a support system for all of our schools, and that we have the services and and all of the places and services supports closer to the heart of our work, which is our students. So let's get into the organizational chart. You have copies of all of this. We can have as much discussion as you want, or this is one of those things. The reason why this is important today, just to remind you of the timing of this, is that by board policy, any changes to the organizational chart has to be posted for a period of 28 days. So the timing is important because as we go through we wait through the posting timeline of that, we have allocations that are impacted that need to be taken care of by mid-April. So we couldn't delay this due to our own policies to make sure that we take care of our folks and that everyone knows of the changes prior to the reappointment process in April. So we'll start with, this is what the 16-17 organizational chart looks like. I just show it as a visual, a frame of reference. It's what you've been living with for a while. Okay. And then moving to the current one and what that structure now looks like, which looks more like this. I'm going to get into each of these changes more in detail, but again, that's just a visual reference for you. But I think this might be what some of you want to see. If you look at the old chart, you look at the new chart, everything to the left are positions that were added to the organizational structure. Everything to the right were positions that were deleted from the organizational structure with an overall cost savings in administrative positions of $171,409.93. A little bit of clarification on that, because some of these are people moving from one position to another position. We might have actual salaries, so we knew exactly what those people were going to cost. If it was a new position that was being added, we always base it on an average salary. But someone coming in new to the district is going to cost less money. So this would be the highest. This would be the least amount in terms of savings. The cost savings would be expected to increase as those positions are filled with people who cost less money, essentially. So, and again, I will get into this in more detail and explaining as we go back to the changes, where those actually fall and how they're represented. I think I'm missing a slide. Okay, so I'm coming back to this one. So I want to show you what's different in terms of the senior level staff, and then we'll get into the boxes below. But essentially there were 2 chief positions that were eliminated and 1 chief position that was added. The goal of this was curriculum instruction is a very large division and sat in multiple locations. They considered themselves, at time I heard them use the word silos. So the goal was to put them all into one structure where there was an increased oversight to ensure that we are maximizing our supports for students in schools. That was the goal of that. So all of that was consolidated into the Chief of Transformation, who's overseeing all curriculum and instruction. And that move resulted in a cost savings of $144,830. And again, all you're doing is adding the numbers from the other chart that I gave you. Okay, so let's go into these in a little bit more detail. Okay, starting with the Chief Financial Officer in that division. The original structure, if you go back to the first chart, showed these 2 divisions, they were being overseen by managers, and they were listed over here to the side. But what that structure did is it had managers overseeing managers. So what we wanted to do was to make sure that we made them 3 separate divisions, and that those reporting directly to them were very visible, so that it eliminated some confusion in that structure when you had managers reporting to managers. In doing so, that was an increase in cost of $5,000, $2,000 to move one from a manager to a supervisor, and one resulting in a $3,000 increase. So an overall of $5,000 on that one. And that is the only one that actually had any increase, and you can see it was very minimal to make that change.
The risk manager is the same, is supervisor of procurement now, correct?
No, the risk management is now the supervisor of risk management.
I'm sorry,
Purchasing is now.
The purchasing manager is supervisor of procurement. That's
Yes, and I'll go ahead and tell you in the back of your packet is the matching job description that goes with every change, whether it was a title change. In some cases, it might have been a change to whom they were reporting to. Those are not things that, as we move into the approval process, which won't come until April, and I don't remember the exact date of that meeting. It will be at a regular board meeting, of course. That's the time that you'll approve these job descriptions. So they're presented in draft form for you. So we have lots of time for you to go through them and look at them, sit down with myself along with the staff and have any conversations about changes to job descriptions. So they're, again, those are in draft form. Any other questions about that one in particular? Okay, it's a separate packet. It's in your folder. It has all the job descriptions in there. Thank you. And I did tell these folks, since this is a workshop and it's not meant to be so formal, is if they have anything, please chime in if I'm forgetting to tell you something that's important. So, again, we build our big round table and we all can sit around a table. And any questions on that one? Okay. Here's the larger one, and this is the Chief of Transformation, and again, it's all curriculum and instruction. This is where we built in that support, the regional support design. I'm going to show you that in more detail. But the goal was to take this division, create one, as I said earlier, and establish 3 different regions that will go into more detail, Region 1, 2, and 3. And then have an executive director that oversaw the academic services and interventions. We know that as a district, meeting the needs of our struggling learners, our growing ELL population has been a major focus. Our data shows that it needs to be an increased focus for us. So that person is going to oversee all of the supports and helping to push all those supports out to these regions based on what those needs are. This was where we accounted for the some of the changes that you'll see on the right-hand side of the cost report, eliminating some of those director positions and consolidating them into regional support systems, so there was some eliminations of those positions. The old cost was $542,942, and the new cost is $536,480. It's a difference of a savings of $6,462. Again, not a huge savings collectively. I think that we'll see about a cost of about $200,000. I think with a growing student population and as a growing community, to be able to have some cost savings in this structure, I just applaud these guys for the work that they did to make that happen. So let's talk about the regional portion first, and then we'll look at the executive directors of academic services and what that looks like. So here's the regional concept. Again, the regions 1, 2, and 3, tried to keep them by district as best we could, but with only 3 regions, of course, there is some overlap. This is what I shared with the principals. We looked to make sure that it all made sense in terms of who was where. So there is a regional executive director who will be housed in that community. They're not here at the district office. They're directly tied to those schools. Their offices will be in those schools, and their job is to daily be in those schools providing direct supports. This one has 14 principals that they oversee. They do their evaluations. They provide that direct support to those principals so that our principals aren't having to figure out who do I need to call for this or that. They call the executive director. The executive director comes back and gets the supports they need and pushes it back out. When I shared this with the principals, there were some empty boxes all below that, and we did some brainstorming. What are the additional supports that we need to push out to you? And they came up with things like we'd like to have an ESC support specialist. We'd like to have a behavioral support specialist. These are all positions that we have, but they're here either in Tavares or they're over in Howey in the Hills. How do we get those people connected closer to the schools as well? And what does that look like? So we did some brainstorming. We made a list of some of those things. But that's kind of level 2. Between now and through the next couple of weeks when we come back to you, we're going to start filling in those boxes based on what supports that teachers feel they need, principals think that they need, and so we'll have that all drawn out so that people know by the end of the year, where am I going to report? Where am I assigned? What am I going to be doing? But that's going to be a lot of work, and so we got to get all these, this is layer 1, we got to get this approved to know that we can move forward with this, and then we'll start filling in phase 2. So that's region 1. Same thing with region 2. There's 16 schools in that region. Those are your schools further to the south. And then region 3 that also has 14 principals to oversee. Okay. Any questions or clarification you would like on that particular design? Because it's still a work in progress for sure, but at least the shell and the vision is there for what that's going to look like.
I just have a question. This Chief of Transformation, is that a permanent title, or is it, are you just identifying it?
Well,
Because when you have to put something in parentheses,
correct. And we've talked about that, as we thought about first defining what are the responsibilities and what's a matching title for that. And this is kind of a national trend as we think about how do we truly transform teaching and learning. And so it kind of captured what it is that we were trying to do and what we will be doing for the next couple of years. But at some point, when we come back, I put the clarification in there because people just didn't know what it meant. But, if we decide later we want to change the title, certainly I'm open to that. But for right now, it is about transforming teaching and learning, improving teaching and learning, and it kind of captured that. So,
I was curious about, for example, the I don't know what to call it. Do these have numbers? Regional Executive Director 3 versus 1?
yeah, we're going to number them.
Okay.
We're 1, 2, and 3. We can do A,
Okay.
B, C, LMNOP.
So the one that is over the Leesburg area and Tavares high schools, those feeder patterns, has 14 schools. The one over Eastridge, Lake Mineola, and South Lake has 14 plus 2 charters, and the one over it's 16 total.
Yeah, just keep in mind, I listed the charters there because they are our kids and our folks, but they're not doing the evaluations of those principals. They're just providing whatever supports they need. So I did want to include them.
So my question basically is, given that the Mount Dora, Eustis, and Umatilla one is 14 plus 2 or 12 plus 2 charters, so 14 or 14 minus 2, however you do it. My point is, the charter principals will probably take less attention, I would guess, or less because they're almost superintendents unto themselves. Is the allocation of reports even enough? That's my question. Because this between 1 and it's 12 versus 14 or 12, yeah. Like, should that be adjusted? It's just a question. I mean, I'm not saying we have to answer it right now.
Yeah, I guess the drawback would be disrupting the feeder patterns.
Well, and I would argue also that they still use a lot of our services. So the curriculum development, the professional development, the maps. I know that the 2 schools, Round Lake and Spring Creek specifically, they use those services. They're still looking to use those services. So I would imagine, what I would envision is that regional director would still be coordinating. Like, that's still going to be the principal contact, and they will be coordinating all of those services. They will be looking at the test scores with that accountability section. So they'll still be contracting that, and honestly, they're going to have to be involved with the paying for those services because our charter schools pay for those services. Yes. So I'd imagine that would be an additional that maybe this one doesn't have, that they don't have to worry about, doing that. I don't know. For me, I can see a balance. I think it's something we should keep in mind. But personally, applaud you for getting the principal buy-in, because I know that I've heard from several of them about what a productive meeting it was. And like you said, now they own this. So I feel like they'll be supportive of this process as well.
I actually heard the same about principal buy-in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's if they have buy-in, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to point. I wanted to make sure it was a fair, distribution of labor.
Yeah, and I think it's as
That's true.
and I think it is about as fair as it could potentially get without, going outside and randomly putting somebody out of a feeder pattern somewhere else. So, one of the things that this district has done really well is develop that feeder pattern structure and set some collaboration amongst that group. And so we certainly don't want to go backwards in that regard.
And I really like that you included the charters because I feel like they get left out often.
Okay. This was that 4th box, the Chief of still under the Chief of Transformation, the Executive Director of Academic Services and Interventions. Again, this is that support system that goes out to the regions. But they're all under one umbrella versus being in 2 or 3 different areas. So, for example, we have the Director of Student Services. I want to note the change there. As we looked at Safe Schools. Safe Schools is your code of conduct. It is our discipline behavioral process, disciplinary hearings. All of that ties back to a support for students and for schools. So it needed to come under the Director of Student Services because it is a student services function. The other side of that, which was an operational function, which was the security manager that was previously under Safe Schools, has moved over to operations because that's a facilities operational issue. So those two have been separated, and one is now here while the other one you'll see later on the chart. This department is where you saw an elimination. It was an elementary and secondary. Now it is all a K-12. Instructional materials, curriculum, that's the department that's developing. We have some specialists in that department that do all of our curriculum mapping and alignment, and lots of direct supports for schools. Director of ESC, and Director of Federal Programs, and those did not change. That's how they currently exist. They're just now under one umbrella. The idea is that these folks are going to spend a lot of time together. They're going to meet once a week. They're going to talk about what the regional directors are finding that they need for support services for schools, and their role is to push them out as they need them. And then this is Director of College and Career Readiness. This is something that is certainly a priority of mine and fell within some of the priorities of the board. We know that the other end of interventions is acceleration, and that we have got to put some support structures in place to accelerate our students, our high-performing students, who often take other options because they don't feel the challenges. So College and Career Readiness is really going to focus on one of your priorities, which was the expansion of our CTE programs. How do we build in more of an academy structure, looking at what are the needs of the community? How do we bring in other business partnerships to support our academies and grow them so that all kids have access in our middle schools and high schools to career-type programs where they can learn in a field of interest and be engaged in learning. This is also going to address AP programs. It's where your AP capstone, which is, we've talked about that. As we grow that and ensure that we have that in all of our high schools, that's going to be their function. They're also going to do a lot with our dual enrollment. Right now, dual enrollment has been under Student Services. It's going to move over to this as a responsibility of the College and Career Readiness Director, who's going to sit and work with our secondary partnerships, like Tech. How do we grow those opportunities? Because what we know is that some of our students who would qualify and do very well with dual enrollment, which is one of the best things that we can offer to families and kids, the opportunity to have paid courses and get college credits before they leave high school. We have students who don't have access simply because of location. Either they don't have transportation to one of the campuses that offers it. So how do we bring that service to them and make sure that all of our kids have equitable access to dual enrollment? Anything else that I'm forgetting to mention underneath that one that was a critical function of that? And then I separated out choice, charters, and community ed. Those are growing responsibilities as well. And if we're going to maintain the intensive focus on developing CTE and our acceleration programs, it needed to be separated. So one of those was a title change. One of them was an addition of the Director of College and Career Readiness. The cost savings within this structure, based on what was added and deleted, is $21,432.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Have you thought about logistics? I know you're talking about them being under one roof and meeting. Where are you going to put them?
That's a really good question. And what we decided, I get the question a lot, where am I going to be? Everybody who can be out in a region, that's going to be priority one. Who needs to be out in regions, let's push them out. Then we'll see what spaces are available. My goal is to get everybody involved in teaching and learning in one place. They're spread kind of far and wide. That is connected to this support structure. They need to be together. They need to be working together, talking together. And we can't do that often because they're just so widespread. And they'll tell you that. So we are looking to try to, how do we get them all in one place? And so that's part of phase 2. Okay. But certainly a priority. Any other questions on that one?
Do you plan to have that strategy of where you're going to put the people by the time we approve this? Is that a goal or no?
It would certainly be a goal. I hope we're there, at least have some idea. Again, in order to create office spaces, I gotta figure out who's going out. Exactly. And where the spaces actually exist. I'm going to go back before I talk about that one to the very beginning and talk about this. As the senior staff met, we had the Executive Director of Technology, Dr. Wheeler,
Stand.
and he had a box. And everywhere we kept trying to move his box, we kept saying, doesn't go there. Technology touches every department. It touches everything that we do. And so collectively we said, and he agreed, that we would like to make that a chief of technology so that he sits on the line supporting the middle of this structure. And it's a title change only. There's no cost associated with that. And he understands that. Although his good friend gave him $1 and said, here's your $1, which I know he appreciated. Actually, I think I threw it at him when he was done. But I think that, and I hope you will agree, that this is always a priority. There's a lot of supports that need to be pushed out to schools in terms of technology. It needed to be a more critical and visible focus, and organizationally, I wanted it to be that way. So rather than having a box where we had dotted lines trying to connect to everyone, it makes more sense. And so that's why it's there. So I'll go back to that so we can go back to that structure. And again, you'll see that on the cost sheet, that we're not changing the salary. Here are the changes underneath the Department of Information Services or Technology. There was a GIS manager in operations that does a lot of our data systems work. Correct? It fit better under this structure. It's just a move. So you'll see it says move only. We just move the position. The other thing that we felt like was really lacking as we looked at the regional approach was that we don't have one individual who oversees the instructional technology piece. We have lots of folks within that division that were all answering to Creed, but in order to have one person to which they're all reporting, so we can ensure not only equity of services, but also making sure that we're supporting the right things. Often what happens is schools, they get money, they want a new piece of software, they want a program, they go out and buy it, and then they go, oh my, who's going to install it? Who's going to support it? It doesn't work with our system. So we needed a safety net for that. It will increase support. It's also going to increase oversight and ensuring that that investment, first of all, works and that truly goes back to supporting the classroom. We didn't have that. So there was this gap between the instructional folks and instructional and technology not having that, what we call the bridge, who works between both departments to ensure that what curriculum instruction says we need in terms of technology is being supported on this side. They can say, they want this, does this work, is kind of their role. And then they'll be overseeing the technology going on within the regions, because we do intend on putting some of our learning specialists into regional positions so that schools have direct access to the technology supports. And so someone has to keep all that in check. So we created that supervisor of technology in order to do that. And in doing so, we deleted a manager. And this was a cost savings of $9,462. Again, knowing that cost savings is probably greater because that's a new position. So as somebody comes into that position, they're probably going to cost less. That was based on an average salary. Any questions on that one?
My question is does that position that's going to provide that oversight and then direct relationship with curriculum instruction and accessibility going to get rid of the technology committee?
I don't know.
Okay.
But
We
it
should
does-
talk about that. I don't know.
The position does report to Dr. Weisskopf and myself.
Okay.
Sort of the same question, is that person going to make any decisions on technology? Like on the aptness, how important it is it quality, that, because we have a lot of junk.
Ultimately, the decisions are going to come back to the senior staff level, and we'll go through, first of all, does it support our vision and mission in terms of teaching and learning? And if so, does it work on the operational side? So between Dr. Wheeler and Dr. Weisskopf, they'll be making those decisions, bringing them back to senior staff. We've talked about processes and making sure that we have processes in place to ensure that people just aren't buying things and spending money that on stuff that's great, but may not directly support improving student achievement. And we do know we have lots of stuff out there. That's one of the tasks, is to look at all those different systems and structures. Say we can have one. We would love to have one system and structure for data management, as well as local assessments and those types of systems that we have multiple ones that often compete with one another and become confusing. So we're going to, that's a huge job, and why we felt like we needed someone with that expertise to oversee that. Okay.
It's legitimate.
There were no changes in human resources. And I do want to point out that we left off a box. We'll cause someone a little bit of panic because we left off their box. But there is a manager of evaluation and compensation analyst that goes right here. If you could please make sure you write that one in, because they are still there. I'm impressed based on the number of folks that we have. Human resources is a small department, and the work that those people do is just incredible. And I want to thank Michelle. She's Hoppenstat. She really put these job descriptions together for you based on the input from senior staff in record time to make sure that you have them today, which was one of our priorities. So thank you for doing that. No telling how long it took you to do all of that. Okay, and we're now at Chief of Operations. There was, again, the move of the GIS manager that moved over. You saw that under Dr. Wheeler's department. I already discussed the move of the security manager from the curriculum instruction, Safe Schools, over to the operations department. So that was a move. Again, no cost. We just simply moved the position. There was a director position that was eliminated from this structure. And there was a title change from supervisor of transportation to director of transportation with a cost savings of $5,340. Okay. Good.
What is frozen? I mean, I know what frozen means, but what? Project manager of compensation to one is
Construction.
Oh, sorry, construction. I can only read up close.
Two allocations there.
And one is, and are we looking to hire one?
No, that position's currently frozen right now, and that box would actually be under Director of Facilities. So on that, where it says the project manager and cost of construction, where one is frozen, that would go under Director of Facilities.
It just means that one is sitting vacant, and I think right now there is not.
The need is not there to support that position. Yes, ma'am.
But because the allocation is in the allocation package, we don't want you to look at the allocations eventually and go, wait, you only said there was one. So there, again, it's just sitting there vacant. If the need ever arises, we have the allocation to fill it should we need to fill it.
The other project manager that's listed in there, that's the one that is in maintenance, and that's,
Route tax.
right. No. The other one at the bottom of that.
Oh, at the bottom, that's our portable coordinator. Basically, he does all the portables. Yes, sir.
We filled that one yet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, so those were the changes to the organizational chart. Good.
I did have, I don't know exactly, I hope I can explain this right. Let me make my microphone loud. Okay, so the ex-previous CPA who sort of advises me, she explained to me at least that what we're now calling the supervisor of procurement and the CFO position sort of compete. And I'm not, Carol, maybe you could explain this even better, even though I'm sort of telling you that they compete. Because Carol's sort of over making sure that nothing is, that what is outgoing is correct. And the supervisor of procurement is incoming. And so there is somewhat of an argument, according to her, that those positions shouldn't be under each other, that they should be separate. They should not report to each other.
Would you like to address that? What the difference is?
Thank you, and I will respectfully disagree. The CFO oversees all business functions of the district. You may be talking more about the finance director and the supervisor of procurement. I look at that as a purchasing cycle. It starts from we approve a budget. Purchasing is involved in making sure we get the best pricing and follow all the rules and regulations that we have to follow. My finance department pays the bills, does the financial reporting. We have more auditors here than you can shake a stick at right now. So it's part of the purchasing cycle, which is from the time we get a budget to the time I pay a final bill. So it's not that they're competing, but they're part of the process. So that's why purchasing should not be under finance. That's why it is across from finance and on the same level. Those both then report to the CFO.
Oh, I got you. Okay. That's fine.
Okay, so that takes us back to the strategic finance plan. This is also in your packet. We talked about this at the first meeting. And what you see in your packet is the summary page, which is on the screen. So essentially what this screen captures is everything that is currently in the strategic finance plan that was either scheduled to sunset this year or is being recommended to not continue its funding for the upcoming school year. So let me talk a little bit about that. This is your reference. Everything that you see here, you'll see in red in this document. Because ultimately what we'll create is a revision to this plan. This will be that last step. We'll come back, we'll include your priorities, and we'll have a total budget to support these priorities. That's not going to happen, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, until after we have a budget. That makes sense, right? We have no idea how much money. Until this legislative session ends, we won't know what our budget is. We might have some idea, but until it's signed and done, everything changes. We've seen sessions where 2 years ago, they ended, they left, went on a break, came back. It was late when we got a budget. Lots of discussion going on between both sides in regards to K-12 funding. We know that there's some bills that will take away some funding from us. And we just don't, there's a couple of things we don't know about. A big one is the digital classroom plan funds. That is on the list to be cut, and we rely on that money very heavily to support our technology. So when they start taking money away on the capital outlay side and we have such great needs within our buildings, we're going to have to start thinking about priorities in regards to how we're going to support areas where we have gaps or holes in our funding that have occurred from this last legislative session. So this is being presented to you. Again, the organizational chart is a separate entity. You can see it's a cost savings and not something that I'm asking you to approve additional cost for. Needs to be approved as soon as it can at the closure of the 28 days so that we can, again, make sure that everyone's reappointed and that we can start the allocation process for the next year. So let me just summarize what's in this packet that I just gave you. We talked about this last time, that it was scheduled that the acceleration resource teachers, and you see the number of those positions, along with the Florida standards teachers, were all scheduled to end based on the 3-year plan that you had for those positions originally. So you see out of general funds how much was connected to that, along with any additional funding that might have been coming through a grant. But I want to put that amount up there. But what you're focused on is anything that's going to hit the general funds, because that's the pot we got to save as much as we can right now until we get the final budget. Then we go back to your priorities, see how much we have, and see how much of what we can afford, because as I said, we can do anything we want, but we can't do everything we want. Personalized learning for teachers and leaders, that was where the Florida standards teachers, there was 11 of them. You can see the cost attached to those individuals. And then personalized learning for students. I had a conference call last week with the folks from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation about this funding in particular. I wanted to know more about what we could do if this money, what the expectation was in terms of this money. They were adamant that the money all goes away December 31st. So what we don't want to do is tie up salaries that are going to end December 31st for people. We don't, so all of that is coming off. And you can see at the end, these were priorities from last year that we did not expend, which was the IB manager, which was in there, and the cost of that, and some of the software money connected to personalized learning that was not spent. So if all of that comes out of the strategic finance plan, and remember, these were not out of the grant. This cost is coming directly out of general funds, which was enlightening to me because I was under the impression it was all grant funded, and it was not. This is the total. When you take all of that out, it's a $4.4 million. So the reason why this is important is because this would require us to say, yes, move forward, because, again, we have instructional folks tied up in this. We also have other positions that are tied up in this as well. So that needs to be the directive back to HR that we're going to take care of all these folks. In fact, we're going to look at how we best utilize. These are some of our very best teachers that we've taken away from kids that we need to push back in front of kids. And so one of the things that we think is a priority, because we know based on our data that it is a priority, is maybe repurposing some of these positions to provide more intervention support for schools. When we met with the principals on Monday, they talked about the need for not only direct supports with kids, but they also wanted more help with intervention strategies and how do we ensure that the needs of all of our kids are being met. So just know that as a district, all these folks will be placed, and we're going to place them where we feel like we can best utilize their gifts and talents, and they have many. So think of it more of a repurposing versus an elimination. We're not eliminating these positions. We'll have vacancies. We always have teacher turnover, so there will be a place for everyone, and so we're going to take care of them. I think that was all on that. Okay. Again, until we have a budget, we can't take action on your other priorities, but I gave you, as best we could, a lot of this has to be determined. Anything that has an asterisk is something that would have to be collectively bargained. So again, until we know how much money we have, we can't move forward with that. It gives you a general idea. The reason why these are highlighted in yellow is that as we looked at that college and career readiness position and investing in that, it's going to take some of these priorities and work on them, basically. Come back with a plan as to how we're going to accelerate, what types of programs and services are we lacking, and where are we lacking those. The other two that are highlighted in green would be the guidance counselor, which was your second priority, and the full-time athletic director. And the reason why they're on here in green is because specifically the athletic director has an impact on scheduling at our high schools, and it is an allocation. So if that is a priority and we want to move forward with that, you can see the associated cost to add 8 of them. That would be something that, like the ARTs, the Florida Standards teachers, those that I just showed you on the previous chart, we need some direction as to whether or not you want to go ahead and move forward with that so that the high schools can know and schedule accordingly. Because currently these individuals, they have a course load. They're teaching 3 periods a day, so it's going to have an impact on the high schools. And then on the guidance counselor, this was also a high priority of your principals at the high schools. You see the associated cost. In your packet is a copy of that job description. But in talking with the principals, what was decided is they didn't want to title it a guidance counselor. That guidance counselor is a critical shortage area across the nation. It's hard to find certified guidance counselors. So we felt like we were kind of putting them in a box. So we're calling it a facilitator. It's an instructional position versus a guidance counselor. They still will assume the same roles as the position was intended. They're going to be tracking the incoming 9th graders, identifying the at-risk cohort, providing whatever services that individual needs, and then making sure that as eventually, as those kids cycle up to as seniors, we will have already addressed their needs, but also making sure that where there are gaps maybe in seniors getting ready to graduate, that they're looking at those students as well. And that will be their singular focus, is looking to make sure that kids are being tracked, services are being provided, we're connecting those kids to whatever services they need, and that our kids are graduating. That's our goal.
One question about one of these, if I could. That's the STEM robotics program in all elementary schools currently budgeted at $1,000, and I see a proposed increase on that one. And I wasn't. I guess that increase is what triggers the asterisk for it to be a collective bargaining item. Is that stipends for teachers to host that club, or?
There,
Okay, that's why.
there was a
$1,000
stipend.
currently is for the equipment and stuff, so that obviously is not collective bargaining. It's the adding.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, it's kind of a package.
Sure.
And some of the cost increased because as we thought about, you're going to have a club.
Right.
So you have club. Say you got 15 kids, $1,000 for one kid.
That's not-
So what are the kids going to do? Or like, you know, every other time we meet, you get to touch the robot.
That's right.
So you need multiple.
That's right.
You need
That's
multiple
exactly
kids.
right.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I've heard from some schools on this that have been able to get started because of that initial $1,000, but would certainly love to be able to expand it much more than that.
Yeah.
So
So this was an addition to, and I
appreciate
think
the commitment.
I think we put that on a said at least 4 kids to start a club so that you know we can grow from there. But it just didn't make sense just to have one kid.
Can we clarify that though too? Because for me, it doesn't make sense to have it across the board. I'd love for it to be offered, but we know that some of them aren't using it. Is it something that we can designate? I mean, I think everybody here knows that I'm very much a STEM advocate, but is it something that we could designate as somebody could do chorus? Like we have a new music teacher at Umatilla Elementary School that's doing piano after school. She's doing chorus after school. She's doing ORF. She's doing recorder. She's doing all of these things. She's literally every day after school or before school doing an additional club. They also have a STEM club, so they need that STEM money. But my point is some schools won't do a STEM club. They don't have the teacher that's going to be supportive of that program, but they might have a music teacher similar to Umatilla Elementary Schools. So could that be something that we repurpose in regards to they have a selected program to begin with to get up off the ground?
Well, I think that, well, at least where I was coming philosophically is that they're both important. That,
Yeah, I
you know,
agree.
based on your school, you know, you don't, your poor kid, whether they get the chance for music or STEM, it shouldn't come based on their zip code. And so that's where that increased fine arts and performing arts offerings is on there too as another priority. Is that way we can continue to bolster both. But going back to your point about not every school is going to want to do a robotics club, and that's where we add the flexibility in this money to say, okay, if you're not going to do a robotics club, because we recognize there's a commitment there, you might not even have a faculty member who's interested in sponsoring the club, then use that money to enhance STEM at the school, whether it's in your technology lab. Now you all of a sudden have the ability to provide things that might support coding that you normally wouldn't have in your budget to be able to do that because you're just trying to replace computers, as they're going out. So I know we're not getting into the weeds of this one today, but I would like to be supportive of both ideas.
In a perfect world, I would too.
Can I back up? Can I back y'all up a second? Is this the whole list of priorities that we had from the original day? Or is this like, I don't understand what this page is.
Okay, and this was what was emailed to you. There was another, and the one that you saw was a column that had how many votes each one of them got, and then based on how many votes they had, they were rank ordered.
Right.
So these were all your top priorities. Some of these that fell to the bottom were either things that were a priority of mine or a priority of schools as I walked schools that were added to the list, but it should capture everything that you stated as a priority from the original list, just in a different order.
Okay, and then what's yellow? What's yellow?
Yellow were the ones I just highlighted because those are being addressed through that position for college and career readiness. Just so that you know that this is gonna continue to be a focus of ours as we look at these priorities, where we can meet the need or support the priority. There might be other means to do it that may not necessarily initially be a cost associated with it. So I highlighted those in support of that position. And then the greens, again, are things that are current allocations or things that we need to decide on sooner rather than later. Everything else we can wait until we have a budget, and we should wait until we have a budget.
Okay, because I sort of thought we only chose 5 last time. Oh, I guess that's my confusion. And this is a lot more than 5.
So what would be helpful, and we took it out because it was the original chart that had it, that showed the ranking or the number of votes that each one got. We can send that back out to you so you can have that. That will clarify kind of what this actually represents. But these are your top priorities based on the number of votes. For example, number 1, 4 of the 5 ranked it as your top priority. So that's how it got at the top of the list.
Okay. Oh, I get it. Okay.
Okay, we're good?
Just one sec, I have one comment.
Okay.
And it was in the 2 greens, which is additional guidance counselors, which I think are critically important. And I think you and I had a discussion about that this athletic director, it may be reasonable that that athletic director could be a guidance counselor. Or maybe we didn't. Maybe I dreamed it.
Yeah, I think you dreamed that.
But I know that a model that where my son went to high school, that the athletic director, in fact, was a guidance counselor. And he sort of headed up the guidance counseling department. So maybe that's an opportunity to get both.
I'll be surprised we have athletic directors who are certified in guidance counseling, as hard as they are defined, but, certainly we can get
With the facility.
Yeah, but I thought you said you were going to call them something else anyway.
I see what you're saying. Yes, we are going to call them something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Something that came to my attention, and I don't think, I didn't know about before, was, and it has to do with the CTE offerings, is that our kids are no longer, when I went to high school, at least Eustis High School was transported to Lake Tech, which is now Lake Tech. Of course, that was 3 minutes away. But I talked to the director of Lake Tech, and she said that we would get a significant increase in kids if we could transport kids. Now busing is obviously expensive, so if that would be, I think that would be pretty important. So I'm guessing it's. I don't know. The last time we looked at busing, it was around $300,000. So I'm looking at this $300,000 for the athletic director, and I'm wondering what is the current athletic director like? I know they get a couple, right? They get a couple periods off, and they do a lot of paperwork, right? But they do get some time off to do it.
They get 2 periods.
Periods a day.
They teach 4. I think I said 3. I'm at 4.
Are they all 4? Are the other 4 all the same preps?
And I don't know the answer to that.
Because that's a significant difference in workload.
You've got some folks that are operating in 4 curriculum classes and with multiple preps, and then you've got some that have elective blends. So it's a variety there.
I mean, that affects work. That does affect workload a lot for teachers. So I don't know. I don't know if I have to choose between, and I know that wasn't something I could bring before because I didn't know about it. But transporting kids to a CTE program at Lake Tech, which could, dual enroll them and get them vocational, a vocational program versus having an athletic director. If that's what I have to balance.
And the good news is that you don't have to choose today. You've changed the process a little bit, where we're looking at more a holistic approach, which has been something that's driven me bonkers over the last few years, where we find that we box ourselves into certain commitments because we've approved, this segment of our budget now before we even know the final number, and then a couple months later we approve another segment, and then another segment, and by the time we get the final budget in front of us, I say, well, I wouldn't have picked this because this other thing would have been more important to me, but I didn't know what the final total would be, and now I think you're just trying to show us. As a refresher, here's everything that we've got on the list, but we don't have to decide now. So at the end of the day, if that $4.5 million is sitting there, then we can choose both. But if the general budget gets reduced in another section, then there might not be $4.5 million sitting there. There might be $500,000 sitting there, and there might be nothing sitting there. So
Yeah, and exactly. In terms of the CTE and providing that access, the vision is that those kids don't need to be transported because we're going to provide the opportunities at their high school. And that's really what we want to do. We want to grow these programs into academies where kids have access on campus. And because the work's been done, the foundation's been laid, our kids have great access to programs. We want to make sure that it's what the kids want and what the community needs in terms of the outcomes as they graduate. What skill set do we need them to have? So that's the goal. It's not to transport them elsewhere, but to bring it to them. So, I'm trying to remember what else is on here. So, back to actually what you were just explaining. This is kind of where we are in the process, and it is a process. The legislative budget that actually, as of last week when I was in Tallahassee, should be changed to 5.8 instead of 4.17. Once we know that budget, we'll bring all of this back to you. And between now and then, my vision is that we keep the priorities in front of us. We continue to work on them so that when it comes time to adopt these, we can give you a very clear idea of what is the cost and how we're going to address your priorities based on how much money we have or don't have. Because the priorities don't go away and the needs don't go away just because we don't have the money. So that's where you just have to get creative. But we will be looking at mid-June before we have that. I gave you the date of June the 5th as an opportunity at a board workshop that is a Monday, not a Thursday, to come and present everything that occurred within the legislative session in terms of our monies and policies, to go over all of that, present what our final numbers are, bring you these priorities back, and that's going to be the meeting where we'll sit down and make these decisions based on a lot of work between now and then. Again, today's purpose was really to focus on the organizational chart. The only thing that gets posted is the new slide, the slide number 2. So slide 1 goes away, slide 2 replaces that. It gets posted for the 28 days. At the following board meeting where you'll take action, you'll vote on that along with the related job descriptions so that the allocation process terms of these positions can be finalized, and we can post any of the new jobs. Some of these are going to be posted, some are going to be appointed. Again, my goal is to find the right people for the right seats, and this gives me the opportunity to do that. So, any questions on what was presented? Again, you have lots of time to look at it. I'll be asking to schedule individual meetings with you all. We'll sit down and answer any questions that you have, and again, look further into your priorities and what your wishes are.
Well, I'll throw out a compliment, if I could, on that regional structure. I know that last couple of years, we as a board have heard some theories about how to separate the department chiefs from having to run a department and also supervise a whole bunch of principals. And it looks like that you've come up with a plan that does that and actually reduces cost and puts those folks more in touch with what's going on in those schools. So, I mean, that's fantastic. That's what I'm most excited about when I see your plan.
I think it'll help your communication a huge amount.
I agree. Ditto.
Okay,
I'm excited about that title, Chief of Transformation.
We voted on it a couple weeks ago.
It will be 44th no longer.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
We are going to transform.
That we're going to transform.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
I have a question back on that same page that the alternative education program, is it gray because, which is in priority 3, 2 lines down from the yellow line? Is that in gray because that's our the thing thank you, the appropriation for the legislature?
I don't see it gray.
Is it not gray?
Oh, the amount of.
Yeah, the font is a slightly different shade.
Oh, for us it is.
Like I've seen it.
Somebody is pretty
gray.
perceptive.
Nice job.
All right.
But yes, we did it purposely that way so that because we know that our lobbyist is working on that for us.
I pass those Facebook color things perfectly. Okay, so that's because obviously that's our allocation or our
Appropriation.
appropriation,
Yes.
which did pass its first hurdle. So, okay, that was my
Okay,
question.
so I'm new.
We're good.
We're good.
Am I done?
Yes.
Do I?
Should have made her stand there a little bit longer.
Yeah. Let's stand here as long
That's
as I
right.
need to.
Would you just conduct the rest of the meeting from there?
All right. Well, that brings us to the board member comments section.
But I would like you to note the time.
Yes.
All right.
I even brought
See how we can drag this out a little bit.
granola bars.
All right, very good. We'll go down the line. Sandy, you have anything to share this morning?
Well, before the break and all, we were invited to go to certain areas because of Dr. Seuss's readings, and I was able to visit Seminole Springs and Tavares Elementary, and I appreciate the time that I had. At Tavares Elementary, I started reading, and this boy says, well, can you read this book? And then this girl said, can you read this book? And I'm like, I already have two. So I spent a little time there in the class, but it was a wonderful time to be able to spend there with them during that time. Also, I visited with the superintendent in schools in my district and was able to sit in and learn a lot from administration about some of their concerns. And then also, I've heard as well from principals and assistant principals, the meeting that you had Monday was one of the best meetings they've been in, so, in 10 years. So, subdivision behind the hospital, a principal brought this to my concern, that she's concerned that with everything that's going on there, how is it going to impact her school? And so if Harry could get with her and just kind of give her an update of what he participates or anticipates her participation level will be. She's concerned because she's already been denied portables when she needed this last year, and if this is going to happen, she doesn't have a place to put students, so she's just concerned. Thank you. Huh? Waterman.
Kristen?
I wanted to, Mr. Neal, what time is the parade tonight? 6:30. 6:30. And at the gym afterwards. That's correct. The parade's at 6:30 and then 7.
7 o'clock approximately at the gym for the state champion Class 6A boys basketball team.
So just for the microphone, I'll repeat. Tonight there is a parade on Main Street in Leesburg at 6:30 for the 6A championship Leesburg High School basketball team. And then a congratulatory ceremony afterwards at 7 p.m. Everyone and everybody is invited to come celebrate. And I would like, at the pleasure of the board, to invite the boys basketball team to a board meeting.
I think
We've already done that.
yeah, it's in the works.
Great. And then also, I did want to mention, I think I had, but that I was told that the principals' meeting was productive and that it was two-way and their conversation was back and forth and that the principal that I spoke with was just very excited by the collaborative nature of it. So thank you for that. I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, you had some handouts.
Yeah, I'm handing out right now an email that I sent to Representative Sullivan, but I want to give board members you kind of an update on what this is about. The Superintendent Moxley had approved without any cost to the district that our Gray Robinson would present to the legislators an addition that Mr. Johnson came up with to Florida statutes that would clearly define what secondary education is. And so here's the statute. included in the presentation to Ms. Langley was all 43 statutes and the language required, or the language we're requesting to be added to Florida Statute 1.3.01. So I wanted to make you aware of it. I actually have forgotten to bring this up like 2 times, but I think with the change, Superintendent Moxley had approved the direction. I have been following up on this with Gray Robinson, and they're just now making some contacts. I've reached out individually to our local delegation, and this is to clarify so that we perhaps can stop some lawsuits going forward in the future, that this would clearly define for what secondary education is, and put an end to thinking that 11, 12, 13-year-olds are part of secondary education. So this will affect students across this great state. Okay, that's yeah. So if y'all want to make phone calls, it'd be amazing. In addition to that, I was invited by Pinecrest to go out and look at their state of construction, and it is a beautiful site. If anyone hasn't been over there, it is stunning. And they had a drone, and those that have followed me on Facebook know that I've lost several recently. but I immediately, the whole time the guy's talking to me after showing me the drone and flying over the site, I just want to talk about the drone. But I'm listening to his presentation, and then I went back and bought one. So look for drone pictures on my Facebook coming soon. The last is Chairman Dodd, I was notified yesterday, modeled after Leesburg and the hard work that Sandy Moore has done with bringing this education, attention to education and support of the community, that Mark Johnson, the city manager, has organized for the first time the principals that are in the feeder pattern that serve Mineola. And that meeting is going to be at 9 o'clock on the 7th. I plan to be there for this kickoff. It is community-driven and community-supported, but I'm going to be there. He spoke about expanding it to all the schools in South Lake. That's why maybe if you wanted to be there, I don't know if we have to advertise it. I don't know.
So this would be separate from the South Lake Chamber meeting.
100%. 100%.
Typically sends the principal to that meeting.
Yeah, I think that this is, I don't know what it is because I haven't been, this is their first meeting. So I'm not exactly sure what it is, but from what
We can go ahead and advertise it just in case.
yeah, because what I garnered from it was that it was really to focus on what can the city, more the city of Mineola, and them reaching out to support the schools. So, and I know that he said not only did he invite our public school principals, but also the charters. So a collective group. That's it.
Very good. Good to know. Thanks. Stephanie?
I just wanted to personally think about, and maybe bring it before the board when we're talking about allocations and coaches and ARTs and standards, all those different teachers. I know that at our individual schools, we've also allotted, when the circumstances arise, extra allocations for different buildings for different reasons. So, well, I know you've been visiting those and they've been telling you those. I don't know if we had a list and if that's something that we need to take a look at again as well, since we're talking about realigning and looking for effectiveness and cost savings, return on investment, that would be another place to look in regards to the number of coaches and the number of potential specialists and the number of those people, especially if we're going to make decisions about guidance counselors and extra facilitators for graduation and so forth.
We'll be happy to bring this
Yeah.
up.
And the second thing I wanted to discuss with the board, we had an update from Angie Langley regarding recess the other day, that something was supported in recess. I wanted to just double check that that's not one of our board initiatives that's being supported by Lake County Schools. We haven't had a discussion about recess yet. I could get into that in deep. I know Dr. Burns and I have had several conversations about it, but we agreed collectively we had the 2 appropriations, and I just wanted to make sure that we're not, that those are our 2 focuses. We're not.
I directed them, like specifically when we were in Tallahassee, to not, that was that I was advocating for that issue, but that was not a Lake County School Board issue.
Okay. I was just confused when we received the email back, because we've been getting updates about our appropriations. I knew those had made it through, but then we got the recess one, and I went, wait a second.
I have let them know about testing ones, but those are in our legislative priorities.
Definitely.
So.
Definitely. Okay. So, and if we want to have a conversation about recess, I'd be more than happy to entertain putting that on one of our agendas, to upcoming agendas.
Well, it's coming in as part of the wellness committee. It's in, like, it's, the policy comes in as part of a policy in the wellness committee policy, and that policy will come before the board sometime soon. I don't know if we want to have a separate meeting about it or not, or a workshop, or.
That's part of it, then it could all be addressed.
My opinion is that we might be a bit premature, because if the
Right, because
legislature
the
comes out with something,
That's right.
It may be moved.
Policy even needed.
Right.
That was the point I was going to make.
So I didn't know if we needed to have the discussion. I just wanted to make sure it's not something that we've hired people to go and advocate for.
Personally, I guess I'd like to see how it shakes out at the state level.
And then put it on.
And then figure out how we would address it locally. If whether the legislature takes no action on it, then that's a separate conversation versus if they do take an action on it. But I agree with you that that it wasn't one of the directed focus points of our lobbyists. That they should be focusing on these appropriations. But I think I wonder if she sent that just because she's giving us updates about a whole bunch of other issues that have been,
Well, for me personally, actually, that is the only update I've
Right.
received.
Oh.
And that's why it sort of jumped out, because I haven't gotten anything else. Like y'all were talking about, she's given other updates.
Maybe I'm confusing her updates with the ones from the FSBA, because we get a lot of
The
emails from them.
FSBA, I look at those daily.
Yeah.
And I also, I was like you, when I received it from Miss Langley, I responded, I said, because it's the only one I've gotten. And I'd received 0 on whether or not they had met with any representatives on defining secondary education. And so she goes, no, I'm just giving you an update. But she said, I'm not working on it, I'm just giving you an update. But I did think it a bit odd that would be the only one that I would get an update on if she wasn't working it. So I'm glad you clarified that, and I appreciate you clarifying
No,
it.
I mean, to be clear, Recess has its own lobbyist. Like, it's the PTA.
I remember
has
seeing
taken
them.
it on.
I remember seeing them when we were there. By all means, I know that that's being advocated for. I haven't. My updates from Mrs. Langley have been via text, and she's been very good about like texting. This one made it through. This one made it through.
I got no text.
Okay.
Apparently, I am not a.
Yeah, maybe we'll ask her to do
Put us all
a
on the
group
same
text.
system so we get all the same information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm perfectly fine with the FSBA, the way that they've been posting where things are. So I don't necessarily need her to text me, other than I was bugging her about the secondary education because I had heard nothing. And then one of the guys from Gray Robinson responded that he was meeting, this is just this week, with our representatives, which seems a little late to me. But so I'm going to be very disappointed if we don't see some movement.
Krista, you said you got an update that it cleared some hurdle?
What? Recess?
No. Our appropriation.
Both of our appropriations have cleared. I don't exactly know their process, quite honestly, because it's so new in the House. But they both passed their first appropriations hurdle. I had a phone call with Metz about the alternative education program, and
So did I.
you have a phone call?
I did.
You did too. And then the Monday of spring break, it went up for appropriation. It went to the appropriations, and it passed. And then the RISE program passed also.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask, Ms. Cornegay, you mentioned the technology funds were. I didn't realize that was being challenged.
It is.
So, I mean, that is part of our basically our priority list is less testing and give us more money. if I were to break it down,
Less testing, give us more money.
so that would essentially fit in, and I think Jennifer Sullivan might be one to reach out to for that because she's on the education committee.
And it would be amazing to reach out because she came and spoke before the REC, which she's also a member of, and she spoke about finding $216 million worth of cuts in education. And so I had sent her an email about that, and I had spoken to two senators. This is in the House, but I spoke to two senators because ultimately they'll shut down some kind of silliness. And apparently the House Speaker is saying he wants 10% cuts across the board. And so But to make a bold statement that you went through billion-dollar budgets and found 216 million you can cut, I didn't get any specifics to what that amounted to.
And I'm sorry, I should have said Representative Sullivan.
That's fine.
Can I add, I did want to also, I had received, I think the reason she texted me, now that I look back at our text, is there were some questions that came up. We had received the email with the questions, and so I had responded with that with Dr. Moxley, and then she had texted me Monday morning first thing about some other questions really quick. Can you get this? So we had kind of been going back and forth on Monday, and that's when she texted me back
For that
and said,
alternative appropriation.
yes, and that's when she texted back and said the first one passed, Mets passed, and then she texted me back like 2 hours later and said the other one passed through the House. So it's really good news all around, and that I do want to applaud them for. Like, I do feel like they're making some headway with our appropriation. So I've been pleased with their progress. So.
And I'd like to reiterate that I have received no text.
I'm going to text her right now.
Would you text her and ask her to
Bill,
text me?
please.
All right.
That's good. I'm done. Thank you.
All right, excellent. I'm afraid I won't be able to join you all tonight in Leesburg, but I'll be celebrating in spirit. I'm down in the Four Corners area with some sort of community group meeting, so I'll be there. But I do want to share some thoughts last night about the Rookie Teacher of the Year celebration. I went home feeling really good because I think this is the first time that I've been on the board that all 5 board members have been present at an event like that. And I think that's just a true testament of the dedication of this particular board to support our teachers. And so that was fantastic. And then I was especially moved by actually you, Stephanie, last night. The number of rookie teachers who had, I guess you had instructed or taught. And so that was fantastic. And how many relationships I had seen that you had with those people. So for you to inspire the next generation of our teachers, it's fantastic. And we should have been recognized in those. So thank you for that. We go to our superintendent.
I'm going to try not to say this every time I have an opportunity, but thank you. I am so extremely blessed to be sitting in this seat, and I'm so excited about where we're going and what we're doing and the people that I have to do it with. And so I want to thank you for all your support and trusting me, and I'm just going to tell you how often as I can. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, do you have anything?
Yes, last week while folks were gone, I received a interlocal agreement and an ordinance amendment from the county relating to the impact fee discussion that we had with Ms. Campion the other day.
Mike?
I'm kidding.
In order to get it passed quickly, if that is your intention to do so, since it has a September 1st end date on it, the trial period right now, it built into the interlocal ends on September 1st. So, you have a workshop 11 days from today, I believe. This Monday is a school board meeting. And then the following Monday is the workshop, and then you have the meeting the following week after that, which lets us in 18 days we can go through a workshop and have it before the board for a decision. So I'd like, if the chairman doesn't mind, to have it put on the agenda for the workshop in 11 days and for the school board meeting. That way we'll have it on the agenda. You can decide what you want to do after the workshop.
Was that April 3rd-ish? 3rd, okay.
There are